Jeremiah 49:7. Concerning Edom, thus saith Yahweh of hosts, is wisdom no more in Teman? Is counsel perished from the prudent? Is their wisdom vanished? Verse 10. But I have made Esau bare. I have uncovered his secret places, and he shall not be able to hide himself. His seed is spoiled, his brethren and his neighbors, and he is not. Call halal Yahweh Bashem Awashai Bashem Rakakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders. Salutations to all my fellow laborers doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so now more so than ever. To the scattered elect that are scattered around the four corners of the earth, that be like unto the speckled bird, the Israelite foreigners. And to the Aquath that are listening and learning, to you, I say Shalom. This is your brother Malchaamah from the branch of the Greatmillstone here in Chicago, coming at you with another lesson in truth. And the video is being profiled. It's called Birth of a White Nation, an interview by Dr. Jacqueline Badalora, who I've followed and listened and used her research to prove many points over the years. She, Theodore Allen, and Dr. Robin D'Angelo, and a host of others. All of the Edomite persuasion, although, and it's just the Spirit of the Lord putting that Psalm 64:8 spirit on them to make them tell the truth. They can't, matter of fact, let's just get that. Because it's not of their own doing that make them go out and bring out all this history, which has been carefully covered up and buried for centuries. All right. The Lord is doing this to Jeremiah need to be in Psalms. The Lord is doing this to them, putting it on their spirit to make them bring forth this stuff. But this is Psalm 64:8. And it reads, so they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. All that see them shall flee away. So people are fleeing away from the narratives, the false narrative and the lies that were created by Esau, Edom, the so-called white man. And just as the Israelite woman was used as a weapon against the Israelite man, mainly being Eve, the so-called black woman, the same thing is now happening with Esau, Edom, with all these evidences and historical facts that lay buried for centuries have now been unearthed. And even though it was a man, it was Theodore Allen who laid the groundwork for this by his research. It was really Dr. Jacqueline Badalora, Robin D'Angelo, and a couple other women that actually were the ones who actually revealed it publicly and nationally. I wouldn't be shocked if Dr. Jacqueline Badalora, who's right here, she used to be a Chicago police officer too, and she breaks, because I'm going to probably do this in three parts, a three-part series on this particular video, which was put up by Rob G, the Nordic, the real, you know how Jake is, the real Nordic black, and when you learn true history, with all this Valhalla and Viking this and Viking that, the Vikings were not so-called white people. That's just more their lies trying to, glorify something that it clearly was not them. Vikings were so-called black people. So were the Danes, so were the English, so were the Scots, so were the Irish. And Jacqueline Badalora is actually from Scotland. And guess what? In Scotland, Ireland, even though there's a lot of pale people there, many of them are the seed of so-called Negroes still, because so-called Negroes ruled all of Europe. And they definitely ruled Britain, Scotland, and Ireland. Right? And that's just some historical facts that cannot be denied if you just do a little bit of research. You don't even have to look hard to see that. All right? But with all that in mind, I'm going to let them speak. I'm starting about the 12-minute mark. And she's going to go into some history. And you have to understand, and in part two, we'll probably get to that Bacon's Rebellion. But she's going to go into some history. There's a little bit of disturbing, which I actually doubted until I did diligent research into it. So, and I'm going to interject and, bring out bring a clarity to a few points. But other than that, we're just going to let it go through the spirit. And so without any further ado, Rob G and Dr. Jacqueline Badalora.
Let me come back to the link with racism after
Yes.
laying some of the historical foundation of whiteness.
Yes.
Because if we're sort of using a timeline, it was another 100 years before what we think of as race then came to be.
Right.
But before that happened, we created these, different groups. So here, let me see if I can give what I call the Reader's Digest version. I'm sure there's a 21st century way to articulate that. So to understand the emergence of this group of people called white people, you have to dig into colonial North America specifically.
So by saying emergence of this group of people called white people, what she's basically saying is that there wasn't anything, there was no such thing as white people. That is a creative narrative that they created, right, to elevate themselves and make separation. All right. And she's going to, and eventually we're going to get directly to the history of the time and the dates when that actually came to be. All right. So whiteness and blackness were created by Esau, Edom, and they elevated whiteness and they downplayed blackness. All right. These two false narratives that are still used to this day.
To the English colonies. And so we're in the 1600s to do that. And there are kind of three movements of the history and during this period that are really important. The first is that during the first 3/4 of this century, of the 1600s, in the colonies of Virginia and Maryland, specifically, people who were stolen from Africa and brought to the shores of Virginia and Maryland.
Now, they were stolen from Africa, but they were not Africans. And she's never made reference to that. She's never made, so that's the chink in the armor of Dr. Jacqueline Battlelor, that she's never acknowledged that the people who came over on the ships were they lived in Africa, but they were refugees there. They were transients there. That was not their land. They came from Israel. They were the wandering and so-called lost Jews, all right, of the tribes of Benjamin, Judah, and Levi, all right, and maybe a few Northern Kingdom that was among them,
And were largely treated as indentured, not as enslaved. So that's a really big, an important thing to understand.
Yeah, in the North, slavery was a little bit different. And the reason being is because you had a lot of Negroes that were already here who were physically related to those people who came from Africa. And many of them, and those were your Huguenots. They were referred to as Huguenots. And the Huguenots were your cryptic Jews, your Sephardic Jews, your Moors, Moorish science and Moorish guys, right? And a lot of them were Masons, okay? And they were enslaving Edomites and their own people. And they were also enslaving and taking the land of the so-called natives. So the truth of the matter is, Moors were some of the biggest race traders to Israel, all right? Because they actually worked side by side with Esau, Edom, and many of them still do to this day. They're referred to as the Boule, but that's another lesson. But let's continue.
And we know that during that time period, persons of African descent and of European descent who worked on the same plantation, they were treated the same. Sometimes a person of African descent could be...
Mind you, that was only in the north, not in the south. The Israelites that went to the south were in hardcore bondage and slavery. All right. And it wasn't a cakewalk for these indentured servants either. All right. And indentured servitude turned into forever indentured servitude, even in the north, as she's going to bring out. But it didn't start off that way. And mainly that's because of the fact that it was a lot of Israelites who owned land and were plantations owners and things of that nation. Of that nature, and were enslaving indentured slavers over their own people and Edomites. And that's true because it was Negroes that actually helped set up the colonies until Esau took it completely over. Never trust thy enemy. All right.
responsible for overseeing others on a plantation, people who are from Europe and from Africa. And so there was no concept of race. People from Africa or from England were treated the same. Class was the big division. It was not uncommon for there to be free people of African descent at all.
And also evidence of that can be in the letter that Elder Tata Dakbar brought out, when the letter that Ben Franklin wrote about the tawny people and the tawny color of the Germans. So what they're showing you, that there were people in Germany who were dark, were ruling class people, and a lot of those ruling class people had a lot to do with the ruling class government and the people that were here in the colonies. So that's just more evidence that it was Negroes in rulership positions, and most of them, even in Django, he said there's nothing worse than a black slaver. So, and who were those? Those were those damn Moors, all right? Those Huguenots, Sephardic and cryptic Jews, all right? Who were hiding behind Christianity and different titles of Christians. Some of them were actually the Puritans and things of that nature. All right. So we've been given a false sense of the reality of history. All right. But we live in the information age, and anyone who disagrees with this, all you got to do is just go do a little bit of research, and you find that what I'm saying is the truth. I did the research. I wouldn't speak on it if I didn't feel comfortable. I wouldn't say something that I can't back up. That could get you in trouble.
What began, and so there was a difference that emerged even during that first 75 years. And what began to emerge is that persons who were stolen from Africa began to be treated as indentured for life. Right? Versus indentured for a term of years, which
because I was going to say, like, the European indentured servitude, it didn't necessarily mean that they were free as well.
Well, they were not free.
They were not free.
They were absolutely not free.
Right, correct.
No.
Yeah, but they were freed after a short period of time, and then they were given opportunities and things of that nature to become citizens, which so-called Negroes were indentured service. They were not given that. All right. And another thing, even during this time, what you have to understand is that so-called white women, there weren't a lot of them here in the Americas, and as they came over, they were marrying so-called black men. They were marrying so-called native men. They were marrying the copper-colored people who in 1681, 83 in Virginia were referred to as the same race, as the same people. All right. The census numerators hadn't started the division yet. All right. And then laws were put in place that made life so difficult for white women who were choosing to be with these men that by no choice they began to choose white men. So what that's telling you, and even in some cases, they will become indentured slaves along with these copper-colored men. Okay, and that proof, that and the evidence of that is going to come out as well. All right, she's going to reveal that history as well. So basically, white women were choosing to be slaves to be with Negroes, and no, they did not want to be with white males. All right, and the short video clip that I'm going to play at the end of all this, then you'll understand why I'm even speaking on this right here. You'll begin to understand it. All right.
And they were, tied up when their ships arrived. They were hosed down, stripped naked, tied up, put on these Europeans were inspected, they had their mouths opened. And
now another thing too is a lot of these Europeans were also Negroes. All right, because they were being put out of Ireland, Scotland, and different parts of Europe. Okay, so she's not being 100% clear on that fact either. So even though there were some white indentured slaves, they were just basically working off to pay off their boat ride and the food that they used. So they became free pretty quickly. All right. So there's a serious difference between an indentured slave and a slave. All right. Which is what the majority of these black slaves became. Okay. In the North, the story of 12 years a slave is good proof of that fact as well. All right. There were plans to get these, and that because that also showed you that they were there were Negroes who were performers and owned houses and homes and things of that nature. This information is the evidence of that. That movie is evidence of that, because that guy was a freeman. He wasn't a slave at all. So how did he become a freeman? Because he was, why? Because he was more than likely the sons of these Huguenots who actually helped set up the 13 colonies in the first place, who were part of the government and everything until Esau rooted them all out and basically put them all in slavery, or whatever. Because then it became then America's government and everything became so-called white, this new form of humanity, which was created, out of this whole deal that we're listening to.
And bodies poked and prodded to see their value to a plantation owner. So So I'm so glad you raised that, because you're getting into actually the second point, right? Let me finish the first point, though. I want to make sure people understand this. Because,
absolutely.
Free people of African descent, free men of African descent, had the same rights and privileges as a matter of law as a European man. And so as a practical matter, this is what that meant. He could vote, and he did. He could run for public office, and I have found 3 who held public office, 3 men of African descent.
There you go.
He could...
And I'm sure she's going to reveal that later on, because I haven't watched this entire video. I've only watched it in portions so that I could do this particular, thing that I'm doing.
Owned enslaved people of African descent, and some did.
Yes, those are the Huguenots, Negro slave owners. And most of them were, and those Huguenots were Moors, all right? Mostly Moors, Masons. And a lot of them, were also the Sephardic crypto Jews. They knew who they were, and they knew that they were enslaving their own people. 2/3 pieces of,
He could own European indentured servants, and some did. They could marry a woman regardless of her nation of origin, and they did with abandon.
There you go. And the majority of the white women were marrying Negroes, because why? Gad had, most of them, their land had been taken. All right, and most of them were indentured servants, or off in the woods somewhere, hiding, keep trying to stay away from Esau, Edom. So a lot of these white women were coming over to America, and they were choosing to be with so-called Negro men, and a lot of white men were left without women. Kind of same thing now, why the MGTOW movement is so big, all right? Because the MGTOW movement started with white males, okay?
It was not at all uncommon during a period when there were roughly 10 to 12 men for every woman. So women were, a commodity. During the time period, it was not at all uncommon for free men of African descent to be married to English women.
So, and that created a problem. So with that, let me click over back to this video. This one.
You feel so comfortable.
Because this video is what made me go and dig up Jacqueline Badalora. And being that, and then Salakia, I've been traveling these last couple of days, and I really wasn't able to I wasn't in a position where I could just sit down and do lessons and things of that nature. The Critical Race Historical Channel, I always try to put at least 2 videos on it, a week. And I failed to do that. So that's basically what these next 3 videos are going to go to that channel, and then I'll get back to current events, etc., etc. But this is important because these things in the past right here help set up the governments and the power structures that you're seeing today. All right. And basically this video is, it said, don't blame patriarchy for your obsession with that chocolate meat. So this is basically, the MGTOW dude being mad, going in on his women for liking chocolate meat, but it's natural for the Edomite woman to want the Israelite man, and the history that I was just sharing with you was evidence of it. And it was only through extreme policy, writing of new laws, because that the laws were written that a Negro can no longer own property, he can no longer vote, he can no longer own firearms, and none of that. And so that made him a serious nobody and made it difficult for these women to have a life with them at that point, because then there were all even laws put in place when this new whiteness was created in 1681 in Virginia, that a so-called black man or a native man could not take a white male to court for anything. So basically, that left them completely vulnerable. You could burn them, hang them, and they did. Kill them, take their property, take their children, take whatever. You could do whatever to them, and you were not in trouble lawfully in any way whatsoever. So after these things were set in place, well, then it was an obvious choice for white women to go ahead and be with their own men at that point, even though they didn't want to. And this is a historical facts that I'm sharing with you. All right. And for you white males out there, you true Edomites, because not every white male is actually an Edomite. Some of them have forefathers that are Negroes or other nations. Okay. So this isn't a color thing. This is a bloodline thing. All right. But for you true Edomites out there, your time is up and you're exposed. All right. And we're going to let this woman who's basically hit the wall, who probably was really hot back in the day, finish her statement, So let's let her talk about this. Say what she's got to say.
This is the reason why women like me have the preferences that we do. Because of men like you who believe us white women are only here to breed more mouth breathers like you. Because after all, that is the mindset of the patriarchal society that you guys so carefully constructed years ago.
Now, the true patriarchal society that the Lord set up is so-called, it was so-called black men, or the Israelites, if you will. All right, copper-colored people, different shades of brown. So white males have nothing to do with the patriarchy of God. They're going to be servants for 1,000 years, and then they're going to be destroyed. All right. They're going to go through the most brutal slavery that mankind has ever seen. And that is right around the corner. Why? Because they're establishing their new world order. And the Lord is, in the moment they go to fill their bellies and implement it, the Lord is going to come and smash them. So this thing is at hand. And that's why information like this is coming out. All right. And what you see, he's trying to shame her. She is old and can't give you healthy children. If you had options, you would realize what a waste it is dating a woman of this age. All right. But to a young black male who's got nothing. All right. And he dates a woman this age. Now he's got a place to live, a car, Jordans, a big screen TV, health care, and all that. So it could be very beneficial to a man who's been stripped of everything. All right. Especially now that you live in a world where the woman has been elevated over the man. All right. So I can't even be mad at a guy, at a young Jake who decides to go this route. And unfortunately, I mean, because I love our women, but our women are not ready to be submissive. They're not ready to submit to the patriarchy that God set up. All right. And they don't typically make life easy for you. They actually make it more difficult. All right. So, I mean, I get it. And I know there's not all of the sisters that's, like the ones that are listening and learning, but I'm just speaking in general. All right. And because those who are doing the right thing, being obedient to their husbands and following law, statutes, commandments, etc., well, clearly it's not. I'm not talking about you. We're talking about the majority of the rest of you. All right. Who are in league with this man who destroys life and set up this crooked system that got us all messed up in the first place. But let's let her continue.
To keep us under your feet for decades. And now when you see us choosing who we want to be with, it just gets under your skin, doesn't it? Yeah, because I more than likely share the same skin tone as you. You feel so comfortable to come onto my page and project your residual racism on me. Try keeping that same energy in the streets with gentlemen with darker skin tone than you.
They're not going to do that.
I guarantee you can't log off and do that. No, you want to stay here and try to harass me.
So basically, she was like, look, try keep that same energy and go and approach, some of these brown men who got that chocolate meat that he's talking about, because that's the name of the video. Don't blame the patriarchy for your obsession with that chocolate meat. All right. This is also just showing you that Esau is losing. All right, because he inherited the whole world. The earth was given into the hand of the wicked, and now he's losing his women yet again. All right, because Jake going to the White Castle and they winning. And, you know, the conditions of a woman shows you the conditions of that nation. But this is real quick, and I'm going to wrap this up. This is Job 27 and verse 15. And it reads, those that remain of him, hold on. It's not what I'm looking for. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's right. Job 27 and 15. Those that remain of him shall be buried in death, and his widows shall not weep. All right? So his widows are not weeping, man. The Edomite woman is done with the Edomite man. She don't really want to deal with him anymore. So this is also everything's come full circle. He set up laws to get his women back, and now those very laws that he set up, his women are protected by them and are choosing not to be with him. This man is finished. Call halal Yahweh by Hashem Abashai by Hashem Bakakwadash Wa Ababa Ball Kwam YASHARAHLA.